Well, hello there, Pittsburgh Steelers fans. Welcome to another episode of Steelers Friday Night Six Pack. I am your host, as always, Tony Defio, and I thank you for joining me on this lovely Friday evening where I am at in Pittsburgh, PA. It's 70 degrees or thereabouts, and on November 4th as I'm doing this podcast. And that's kind of scary because what's November 7th going to be like, or 10th or 12th or whatever? Is it going to be 20 degrees? Who knows? But as I always say, I hope it's pleasant wherever you are in Steeler Nation, whether you're watching me live right now or listening to me at a later time. And before I continue, I'd like to ask you to please like and subscribe to our Behind the Steel Curtain YouTube channel. We bring you live shows each and every day and night, including the Steelers Hangover every Monday with Brian, Anthony Davis, Shannon White, and yours truly. Tuesday, we have the Scobro Show with Dave Schofield and Rich Schofield. Wednesday, we have Know Your Enemy with Jeffrey Benedict and Shannon. Thursday, there's a preview with Jeff Hartman, Dave, and Brian. Friday, earlier on Friday at 5 p.m., we have the Touchdown Under Show with Matty Peverall and Mark Davison from Australia. Over the weekend, we have State of the Steelers with Daniel J. We Run the North with Kevin Tate and his friends, and they discuss all things AFC North related, Pittsburgh's enemies in the division. And what else we have? I think that's it for the live shows. Of course, we have anytime there's breaking news, we have that for you live podcast. And of course, you can always catch, excuse me, all of our live shows also on Facebook. And you can catch our live shows in audio form after the fact anywhere you can find podcasts. You can find Behind the Steel Curtains podcast family. So please check that out and check out the audio only podcast that we provide for you every week, including Let's Ride with Jeff Hartman. We have the War Room with Matty Peverall. We have From the Cutting Room Floor with Jeffrey Benedict. We have What You're Talking About with Kyle Kreis. We have Steelers Fix with Jeremy Betts and Andrew Wilbar. We have Bad Language with Brian Anthony Davis. There's one I always forget it. Here we go, Steelers show. That's the preview. That's the pregame show, and that's with Brian and Kevin Smith, KT Smith, who brings great expertise in the X's and O's department. And that's an actual live show, I believe. It's a live show. So check that out. Check all those shows out. And check out Behind the Steel Curtain, the website. We bring you news, commentary, film breakdown. It's your one-stop shop for all your Steelers needs. You will not be sorry. So please check us out. And let's check out, speaking of checking stuff out, let's check out the live chat. Let's see who we have in the crew tonight. We have George Teston, who was first in the room. Welcome, George. Jared Devil, who's always a strong contender for that title. We have Stacy Lynn, who says, hi, Tony. We have Kathy Ford, who says, hello, Tony. Brian Brown, always a regular. Takaharu, who says, Tony, do you buy the theory that the Steelers are tanking and they're just not saying it? Well, I'll get into that. Sherry Richards, who says, hey, Tony, what's up? Jim McGowan, who said from Facebook, who says, hello. All right. So we got a good crew in here tonight. We're ready to talk some football. And of course, before I get into anything that happened during the week, we have to do a small review of last Sunday's game against the Eagles at Lincoln Financial Field. Wasn't much of a game, was it? It wasn't much of a game. It looked like it might be early on after the Eagles went up 7-0, and then Pittsburgh went on that long drive to follow that up and tied the score on a little fourth down receiver option pass from Chase Claypool to Derek Watt. But as has become a familiar sight for your Steelers defense, the quote-unquote elite defense in 2022, they allowed the Eagles to march right back down the field and take a 14-7 lead. And that was all she wrote pretty much. And the Eagles kind of flew away, no pun intended. And the final score was 35-13. And Pittsburgh dropped to 2-6. And they go, I don't even say limping into the bye, more like they go into the bye in a coma, in hibernation, however you want to say it. It's a very bad team right now. Things aren't going well, and obviously it starts with the offense. That's the popular scapegoat, Matt Canada being the face of that offense, and he's I guess, really the poster child for. I used two cliches here: the scapegoat and the poster child, but they're both Matt Canada. People were clamoring for him to be fired this week at the bye. And Mike Tomlin announced during the week at his press conference that wasn't going to happen. He said that with one word, no, when asked about it, when pressed about it by the media. Were any of the changes on offense, because Tomlin did hint to making some changes on offense, that he was open to anything. And when pressed about whether or not that meant firing Matt Canada as the offensive coordinator, he said emphatically no, and then shut it down, and that was it. And of course, that sent the media into a tizzy, the fans into a tizzy, and of course, they were already into a tizzy before then because they've been wanting Canada to be fired for quite some time. I think since about 5 minutes after he took the job in 2021, really, if we're being honest, or at least 5 minutes after that Bills game started in week 1 of 2021. They've wanted Matt Canada fired, but he's still here. He's going to be here the rest of the year. By all accounts, if they don't fire him now, they're not going to fire him before the end of the year. He's the Steelers' offensive coordinator through the rest of 2022, and we're just going to have to live with it. And it doesn't matter how much we tweet about it, how much we devote podcasts to it, how much we devote articles to it, how much the quote-unquote professional radio people, and I think you know who I'm talking about, talk about it. It's not gonna happen. They're not gonna fire Matt Canada, and Pittsburgh's just gonna have to get through this year, struggling on offense and hoping to see some signs of improvement, which seems pretty almost impossible now, based on how the first 25 games of Canada's run have gone. And if you really want to go back to midway through 2020 with Randy Fichtner in charge of the offense, it's really looked the same for about 2 full regular seasons. So yeah, you're just gonna have to continue to march through it, to march on. If you're the Steeler fans, and if you're the Steelers, you just have to find a way to if you're the fans, enjoy it or endure it. And if you're the players, you have to find a way to clean things up, to improve, to win individual battles, and try to show some improvement. Obviously, I've been on record as saying that I don't think Matt Canada is the right man for the job anymore. But when you hear other people talk, people who know about football, people who watch film, like, for example, Chris Hoke, who was on the Cook and Joe show on 97 The Fan on Thursday, he said, look, I've been watching film for 11 years. I know how to break down film. I know what I'm doing. Or he should say, I played football for 11 years in the NFL. I know how to break down film. I know how to watch film. And let me tell you, there are a lot of plays that Kenny Pickett he's just not executing properly. He's missing open receivers on a lot of plays. And it's not just Matt Canada. And, people on Twitter have illustrated this. People who are less professional than Chris Hoke, who have no NFL experience, and they've been highlighting some of the plays that Pickett has missed. The wide open receivers, and that's just, why is that happening? Is it coaching, or is it just the fact that he's a rookie? I'm leaning towards the latter. He's a rookie, and these things happen with rookie quarterbacks more often than not. It's as I've said before, it's very rare that a rookie comes in and a rookie quarterback anyway comes in and takes the NFL by storm. In fact, it almost never happens, So when you see these plays highlighted on Twitter, when you see people like Chris Hoke talk about them and illustrate them when making radio appearances, when appearing on TV with people like Bob Pompiani, it kind of gives you a little bit of hope that maybe as Pickett's rookie season continues to evolve, that he will learn from his mistakes and start finding these open receivers. Now, does that mean that if the Steelers' offense drastically improves between now and the end of the year, that Canada should retain his job? I mean, I guess it all depends on how you define improve. If they do improve drastically on offense with Pickett in there, and the offense is much better over the last 9 games, then yeah, I guess you can say you would almost have to keep Canada, right? But if things continue as they are, then yes, you're going to have to probably move on from Matt Canada. But moving on from him now, I don't see where that really helps anybody, including Kenny Pickett. I don't see what you would get out of firing Matt Canada when you're 2-6. When you're not going to bring anybody in from the outside. You're going to promote Mike Sullivan, the quarterback's coach, who has OC experience in the NFL. You're going to promote him presumably to be the new coordinator, and all he's going to do is try to put a different spin on Matt Canada's playbook. So, to me, I mean, you have a young quarterback in there, and Kenny Pickett. You threw him in there probably much earlier than you expected in week 4 in the second half against the Jets. And he's just gone through the toughest part of the Steelers schedule, really, when you think about it. On the road against the Bills, at home against the Bucs, and then Sunday Night Football against the Dolphins, which people thought they could win. I thought they could win, but that's a pretty good team, especially when Tua is in there, and he came back in that game after missing a few weeks with a concussion. And of course, last week in Philadelphia, the only undefeated team in the NFL. So he just went through the toughest stretch of the Steelers' 2022 schedule, and he did so as a rookie. His first four starts were in that situation, and that's not ideal for a rookie quarterback. So you have to understand what he was facing, and to expect things to be pretty through that run, that was unrealistic, and they were far from pretty. I mean, Pickett, he looked like a rookie. He looked much more like Terry Bradshaw through those 4 games than he looked like Ben Roethlisberger. As far as both of them being rookies. So, you just have to keep trotting him out there, and to have him go through that kind of experience, and then also on the other side of that, all right, we're getting rid of your offensive boss and we're bringing somebody else in. So deal with that now, Kenny. And I just don't think that'd be fair to him. So I think you have to ride it out with Matt Canada for this year and hope that Pickett can, again, learn from his mistakes and improve as the year goes on. And before I lose it, not lose it, crazy wise, but lose it in the live chat. Sean Manahan donated $5, and I got to acknowledge that and thank him. I'll bring that up here and thank you, Sean. And he says, with the Steelers' remaining schedule, they can go 9-8. Yeah, theoretically. I mean, when you're talking about teams like the Saints, Falcons, and the Panthers, of course, the Browns are no. They don't look like a contender this year, although they did beat up on the Bengals last time they played. So that was pretty interesting. But that's assuming that Pittsburgh's even as good as teams like the Panthers and the Saints. The Saints just blew out the Raiders the other day, and Raiders were considered the quote unquote best bad team in the NFL this year. So I don't know. I mean, I hope you're right, Sean. That would be exciting. I guess that probably would put them in playoff contention at the end of the year. But I'm just, to quote Dennis Miller, Pittsburgh native comedian, I'm just not getting that vibe right now, babe. But thank you for the $5, and I hope you're right. Now where was I? Kenny Pickett. Yes, Kenny Pickett. You're already hearing people talk about Pickett being a bust. I saw that being tweeted out, and maybe I should never read Twitter, but I can't help it. With what I do here, I have to read Twitter. I have to listen to talk shows. I have to read comment sections, and you already see people as recently as Sunday when the game was still going on against the Eagles. People saying, "I hate to admit it, but I think the Steelers might have made a mistake with Kenny Pickett, and it might be time to consider drafting people like C.J. Stroud in the 2023 NFL draft, assuming they have a top 5 pick, which right now they would be drafting 4th if the season was over today." And I'm like, I don't think you can say that right now by Kenny Pickett. This is 4.5 games into his career. 4 games really, because he was knocked out with a concussion early in the second half against the Bucs. It really is 4 games of NFL action under his belt, and people are already saying, "I told you about Kenny Pickett. I told you it's a reach." It's like this is what I'm not surprised by it, but this is the kind of stuff that just frustrates me. And as you can see, if you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, I don't have much hair, but if I could, I'd tear it out, which would do me no good because it would make me look even worse. But I would tear it out because when you have a rookie, you should expect struggles. You shouldn't immediately be calling for the team to allocate more draft resources to pick another quarterback in the very next draft. That's what not bad football teams, but bad organizations do. That's what organizations that are in shambles do. And we'd like to think that the Steelers aren't quite in shambles. They might be bad on the field. They might have a bad roster. They might be in a bad patch in terms of their on-field history. But I don't think they're that kind of an organization that would give up on a guy that they drafted in the first round 1 year after doing so. That's just not what a team like the Steelers does. You have to let Kenny Pickett take his lumps. Because like I said last week, these aren't your 2004 Pittsburgh Steelers. These are your 2022 Pittsburgh Steelers who, to circle back to something I said about 5 minutes ago, they're more like your early 1970s pre-72 Steelers than they are your Super Bowl era 2000s Steelers. That's just how it is. So, you have to let Pickett just keep going out there and figuring out on the fly, as he's playing, and not, sitting and quote unquote learning. And that's what kills me about these people that say that he went in too soon. Maybe he went in sooner than Mike Tomlin wanted to put him in, but when you're a rookie quarterback, you're never ready before you go in. I don't care who you are. You're not ready before you go in. The only way you're going to be ready is to go in there and just experience it, just like anything else. To quote Turk from the pilot episode of Scrubs, you learn by doing. You don't learn by sitting, and you might learn a little bit, but you can watch all the film in the world. You can ask for all the advice in the world, but you're not going to know what it's like to be a quarterback at the NFL level until you get out there and start doing it. And that includes all the mistakes. That includes missing wide open receivers. That includes calling the wrong play. That includes not having your guy set on important 4th and 1 situations, or 3rd and whatever that was in the Miami game. So it was never going to be the chance of it being pretty for Kenny Pickett early on, and we're slim, and I think we're witnessing that. So that's all I want to say about Matt Canada, the offense, and Kenny Pickett, and I'll touch on more of that later. But right now, I want to take a few seconds for you guys watching live, but for you listening after the fact, stay tuned for a word from our sponsors. I'll be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to Steelers Six Pack. I'm your host, Tony Defio, and I'm glad you stuck around after that commercial break to listen to more of my rambles, more of my rants. And before I get into more rants, let's talk about some moves the Steelers made after that 35-13 loss to the Eagles on Tuesday at the trade deadline in the NFL. A day that used to be any other Tuesday. Now it's a frenzied day as teams in the NFL make trades just about every year now. There never used to be major trades in the NFL. Now they're commonplace, especially at the deadline. And on Tuesday, Pittsburgh sent Chase Claypool, the 2020 second-round pick, their first pick that year because of the trade to the Dolphins for Micah Fitzpatrick in 2019. They traded Chase Claypool to the Bears in a surprise move. Not only was it a surprise that they traded Claypool, a player who still had one more year on his rookie deal, but they got a second-round pick from the Bears, their second-round pick, their own second-round pick, which they're 3-5 right now. It figures to be a top 10 pick. I think I read today that it's projected to be the 38th pick overall in 2023. So, I mean, there were rumors about Claypool being traded a week or two before the deadline, and I figured if they did trade him, they might get maybe a third, but more than likely a fourth, a fifth, a sixth, something like that. Because Claypool, he had a great rookie year, but his second year, I mean, stats wise, receptions and yardage wise, it was similar to what he did in 2020, but he just wasn't as explosive, and he wasn't as productive in terms of scoring touchdowns. Not nearly as productive. He had 11 total touchdowns in 2020 and just 2 in 2021. And this year, he was relatively non-existent except for that Buccaneers game when he helped them upset the Buccaneers with a lot of important catches and a touchdown in the fourth quarter. So I didn't think that anybody would offer much of anything for Claypool, but the Bears did, and I guess all things considered, it was a good move for Pittsburgh because let's face it, they don't have much talent overall on this roster, I don't think. But if you're looking at a position where you could say there's quality and maybe a little bit of depth, it's certainly a receiver. And you just paid Deontay Johnson $36 million through 2024, right? You're gonna be paying him $18 million a year starting next year for the next two through 2024, and you just drafted George Pickens in the second round, and he looks like he's going to be their star receiver sooner rather than later. And you have Calvin Austin you drafted in the fourth round. You don't know about him yet if you're the Steelers or if you're the fans or anything, because he didn't even play in the preseason, and they never took him off the IR, and now he has to stay on IR all year. So you don't know what you have in him, but you do know that he's going to be a rookie again next year, and he's a fairly high pick. Steven Sims, who has shown some potential as he certainly showed a lot of potential in the preseason as a receiver, and he's shown a lot of potential in the regular season as a return guy and somewhat as a receiver. And of course, you have Gunnar Olszewski, who's nobody's really excited about him, but he's another guy there that you sign to a deal that you could maybe use him a little more as a receiver, and if you decide to move on from Claypool. So they moved on from him, and they accrued a second-round pick, which means if they continue down this losing path, they're going to have a top 5, top 10 pick next year, and maybe 2 top 10 picks in the second round. So, it'll give them a chance to address some major needs on this team, starting with the offensive line. And, I was somebody who was a great defender of this line, especially, as far as of taking a wait and see approach, I should say, with this offensive line. But now I'm starting to think that maybe Kevin Dotson just is not a good football player. He showed a lot of promise in 2020, his rookie year, but I mean, his play has declined so much over the last couple of years. It's really, I mean, it's a shock to me. I'm not a football expert by any stretch, but I certainly expected Dotson to be a mainstay at left guard after his rookie year, and for him to fall so far from grace since then, and for his play to just drop off so much, to me, I don't know how to explain it. I mean, maybe it's a bad fit. We talked in the summer about Pittsburgh wanting to go to a more of a zone blocking scheme with Canada, and now and how Dotson, Shannon mentioned a lot. Dotson's more of a road grader type of a offensive lineman, not as athletic as people like Hendrick Green, which is who Pittsburgh drafted in the 3rd round, and now he can't even get a helmet. I almost swore he can't even get a helmet. That's how well that's gone since they drafted him in 2021. And Dan Moore, I mean, I'm not ready to give up on him yet, but he's not improved as much as I would have liked after his rookie year. Now, maybe I'm being unfair, expecting him to improve so much so soon. I don't know, but I would certainly, if I'm Pittsburgh and I'm sitting there with a top 5 or 10 pick next year, at this point, you would have to consider strongly left tackle or an offensive tackle next year. Obviously, I think a top 10 pick would be too high to spend on a guard, but maybe that's what they use one of those second round picks for. And if you don't spend either one of those picks on any of those picks on an offensive lineman, you certainly have to look at the defensive line now. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. I mean, I like the Marvin Leal, and I think he showed a lot of great potential. He showed a lot of potential before going on the IR. I don't know if he's going to be lost for the year or not. I don't even know what the injury is, but you're going to hopefully have him back at least by next year. But I think you still need to address that line. Maybe infuse it with some more pedigree, some studs. That's Cam's not getting any younger. Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi's been okay, I guess, but he's only on a 1-year deal. And of course, Tyson Alulu is just he might be past his expiration date at the age of 35. So you might have to. That's where I would start if I'm them. I would start in the trenches. Now, if there's a stud corner, say they're drafting, in the top 5 or 10. I haven't really looked at the draft, to be honest with you. I don't really want to. I think it's way too early to be talking draft. on a regular basis anyway. But when your team is 2-6, it's hard to avoid it. But anyway, if there's a top 5 or 10 corner available, at this point, I would strongly consider taking one. People have been criticizing Pittsburgh for their failure to draft cornerbacks, but really, I mean, those guys are hard to find. The really top corners are hard to find outside of the top 10, and they rarely, as you know, draft in the top 10 or even come close to drafting in the top 10. So that might be, Joe Hayden was the 10th overall pick. I think it was in 2013. And, when they went out and signed him, he came in here and made a huge difference. Was that because they suddenly figured out how to develop cornerbacks or find cornerbacks? Or was it because Joe Hayden just happened to be a top 10 pick that fell into their laps? So I would consider that too, because, let's be real. Keller Witherspoon, we talked about the book on him coming into 2022 was his inconsistency. And we certainly saw that in 2021 when he barely played over the first half of the year. And then by the second half of the year, by the end of the year, he was their best corner. And there was hope that that Keller Witherspoon would show up in 2022. But no, he's playing more like the guy who doesn't deserve a helmet, to be honest with you. And Levi Wallace, I've been disappointed in him. The free agent they signed this past offseason, the guy who was supposed to be the upgrade over Joe Hayden, who they moved on from after last year. But again, maybe I'm wrong for being disappointed in Wallace. Maybe I'm expecting too much from him. I mean, here was a guy who was a walk-on. I'm sorry, an undrafted free agent out of Alabama in 2018, and he put together a good career with the Bills. But he also found himself on a really good team, on a really good defense. And maybe he's more of a role player on a really good defense than somebody who can come to a bad team and elevate a secondary, for example. So maybe it's unfair of me to be down on Wallace. But at any rate, I certainly think the secondary, specifically the cornerbacks outside of Cam Sutton, they need to be addressed. It's another area that you have to seriously look at if you're Pittsburgh going into the 2023 NFL draft. Speaking of cornerbacks, in addition to trading away Chase Claypool, somebody that they drafted 2 years ago, they also acquired somebody they wanted to draft 6 years ago, and that's William Jackson III, who they traded a future late round pick to Washington for and presumably to be one of their starting corners. Now, you would think. I mean, he signed a 3-year, $40 million deal with Washington. I guess it was in 2021, prior to 2021, and he's owed around just under $3 million for the rest of this year. So you're not going to pay a guy that kind of money if you don't want him to come in and start. And he has started 64 games. He was drafted by the Bengals. If you remember that 2016 draft, he was linked to the Steelers in the weeks leading up to that draft. Out of Houston, he was kind of a late bloomer and somebody that rose in the rankings based on his pro day and things like that. And it looked like Pittsburgh was going to have a shot at him at I guess it was pick number 25, I want to say. But the Bengals swooped in and surprised everybody and drafted William Jackson with the pick before Pittsburgh. And then, of course, Pittsburgh went out and drafted Artie Burns, who looked to be a fine player as a rookie, but then he regressed from there. Was never really the same after that. As far as Jackson, he's had an okay career, but again, nothing spectacular. He's never made a Pro Bowl, never made an All-Pro team, but he did manage to get Washington to pay him $40 million. So, it goes to show you how hard it is to find really good corners. And if you can find a solid one, you might have to pay that guy a decent amount of money. And if I understood Dave Schofield's breakdown of Jackson's salary correctly, if Pittsburgh wants to keep Jackson next year, 2022 or 3, they'll have to pay him $20 or $12 million. If they cut him, there'll be $9 million in dead cap space. So I guess this is going to be kind of an audition for Jackson to see if he can, at the age of 30, become one of their future starting cornerbacks heading into 2023. So we'll see what happens there. The word on him is he's not that great in zone coverage, which was why he might have struggled in Washington, which that's the kind of defense they like to run there. And Terrell Austin likes to run a bit more man, so maybe he'll be at home more in Pittsburgh's defense. We'll have to see what happens, but I'm anxious to see what he does once he makes his debut. So I like both deals. Back to Claypool, it's just a shame that things deteriorated for him so quickly here. And maybe that's a lot of his own doing. You heard rumors almost right from the beginning of his, or I'm sure at the end of his rookie season, that he was a diva-like player and a distraction in the locker room. And those things were being said on Tuesday after he was traded away. But I think a big part of his problem was that he just got caught up in the wash, so to speak, with the rest of the struggles on offense that the Steelers were having. I mean, I think it's when you have struggles as a team. I mean, it affects everybody. It's hard to stand out and be a dominant player when the whole offense is struggling. So I think that was part of Claypool's downfall here. And so maybe he can go to Chicago and become a star and help turn Justin Fields into a star quarterback. We'll see what happens there. So good luck to Chase Claypool and good luck to William Jackson III. And I just have one more topic I wanted to touch on before I answer some questions and highlight some comments. And that's back to the OC. And is Matt Canada a problem for the Steelers right now? Absolutely. I'm going to swear again. Is he their biggest problem? I'm sorry. Is he their only problem, though? No. Is he even their biggest problem? Again, I mean, I'm not going to say no, but I'll say maybe not. And why do I say that? Because right now, if you were to listen to the fans, the talk shows, if you would read the articles about the Steelers, the tweets, you would think that Matt Cannon and Kenny Pickett were the only two people involved with the Pittsburgh Steelers, with, of course, Mike Tomlin serving as the supporting role right now, although everybody wants him fired. But right now, he's not the lead scapegoat. He's playing the supporting role of scapegoat to Matt Cannon and Kenny Pickett now. But this defense is just god-awful. It is. And the offense is ranked 28th in the NFL. The offense is horrible. There's no question about it. They're averaging 15 points a game. Jeffrey Benedict pointed out the other day, it's the worst this offense has looked since 1970. And to give you an idea of how long ago that was, I wasn't even born yet, and I'm old. Okay? So this offense is awful. But the defense is even worse, if you can believe that. It's even worse. It's ranked 29th in the NFL. 29th, including 31st against the pass. Thank you, Akilla Witherspoon, right? They've given up 17 touchdowns in 8 games. That's what? A little over two a game. Not good. Last year, with TJ Watt in the lineup, mind you, because I know people are going to say, well, TJ Watt's not in there. That's why. Well, TJ Watt was in the lineup last year, and they finished 32nd against the run. This year, they're 15th. Not bad. nice improvement. But now they decided they to play really bad against the pass, and they're 31st. So, we can point to TJ Watt's absence since week 1 as the reason why this defense has been bad. But come on, an elite defense, which people were saying this was coming into 2022. Would it miss TJ Watt? Yes. Would it miss it to the point where you drop from, if you're an elite defense, you're top 5? Would it drop you from a top 5 defense to almost the worst defense in the NFL? I don't think so. I mean, there's too many pedigreed players on that side of the ball, including Cam Hayward, Larry Ogunjobi, obviously Minka Fitzpatrick. Terrell Edmonds has turned himself into a really solid player. Miles Jack, right? There's too much talent on that side of the ball to where it should fall off that much without TJ Watt. And plus, you have supposedly you have 3 great defensive minds coaching these guys, and Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, and of course Brian Flores. So to me, why the offense is getting so much of the blame? I get why you're blaming the offense, but why is it the only thing you're blaming? Why aren't more people calling out this defense? Because this defense is horrible. And if I had to put a percentage on what was more disappointing, based on what you're paying these guys, the most in the NFL, and what you expected of them coming into the year, I would say it's 55-45 in favor of the defense in terms of who's more to blame. This defense is terrible, absolutely terrible. It's getting pushed around every week, and they haven't had a takeaway in 3 games. They haven't had a takeaway in 3 games. 3 games. An elite defense never goes 3 games without a takeaway. As I pointed out before, they had 7 sacks in week 1 with Watt in there. They've had 8 since. They had 5 takeaways in week 1. They've had 5 since. That's not a good defense. That's a bad defense. And in the early 2010s, after that Super Bowl defense got old and guys started to retire and get cut, I would argue with people all the time that this defense wasn't the same anymore because they weren't sacking the quarterback and they weren't taking the football away. And people would argue with me and say, hey, how can you say that? They're ranked number 1 in yards. They always stop the run. And, they had a compelling argument because it was right there on, Pro Football Reference. You can't deny what you see in front of you. They were a number 1 ranked defense. Well, now you don't even have that argument because they're ranked 29th. So, they're a horrible defense and they deserve just as much blame as the offense, if not more, so it's just, again, like this, I hate to use the word exhausting because I'm not really exhausted. And it annoys me when people say, oh, I'm exhausted by this kind of talk or that kind of talk, or I can't handle all these mock drafts. People say that kind of stuff in the off season, which is really not true, but it is rather annoying to turn on the radio, to go on Twitter, to go on Behind the Steel Curtain, and all you ever see are 2 words, Matt Canada. All you ever see anybody talk about is when is Matt Canada going to get fired? Has he been fired yet? And people posting stats, people sending me text of stats. I get it. The offense is bad. But to circle back to what I said earlier in the show, what do you think is going to happen if they fire Matt Canada right now? Not a whole lot. Do you think they're gonna Sean Manahan, was showing some optimism earlier based on the schedule that they might be able to turn things around, but they're probably not going to be able to turn things around, at least not that drastically. So, as we keep saying every week, this team is not one move away from turning things around. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to turn this ship around. And I said ship with a P in case Brian's editing this later and he thought I swore. Turn this ship with a P around. Okay, so anyway, it's enough ranting for tonight. Now I will highlight some comments and questions, and thank you for letting me rant. I see I made somebody angry because I see the angry emoji up there, which I think I get one of those every show. Same on The Hangover, so I keep that streak alive. This is one from Javier More, who who echoes Sean's sentiments, and he says, "I see wins against the Raiders and Carolina." Oh, wait a minute, no, he doesn't echo. See, I spoke too soon. I see wins against the Raiders and Carolina, but they'll probably be underdogs in every game except Raiders. 4-13 is actually in play. Yikes! That's the way it looks right now. And this one from Sean Manahan again, who follows up on what he said earlier. The rest of the schedule isn't that tough compared to the gauntlet Pittsburgh just went through. That is true. I think somebody, one of the commenters on Behind the Curtain, pointed this out the other day. They had the toughest schedule over the first 8 weeks of the season, and over the next 9 weeks, it's going to be. It's right now. It's the 20th toughest schedule. So, maybe they'll pull some more wins out. But the question is this, and would it be in their best interest to finish 9-8 or 8-9 or 7-10 and maybe barely make the playoffs or barely miss the playoffs? Or would it be in their best interest overall to finish 5-12 or 4-13 and get a higher draft pick and try to address some major needs on this roster? I don't know. I mean, not that they would try to do that. I want to emphasize that they're not trying to tank. People always say, "Oh, they're," like Brian said on Monday, "Oh, they have too much pride to tank. Their jobs are on the line. They would never try. Nobody tries to tank." And I think most coaches don't purposely try to tank, at least not in the NFL. But they might not have the material to do anything but tank. So I think that's when people say when they hear the word tank, they think you're losing on purpose. But they just might not have the team capable of winning more than 4 or 5 games. That just might be the reality that they're facing right now. But I was very upset in 2003 when they lost the last game of the year. They were already eliminated from the playoffs. They were 6-9 Sunday Night Football. They lost in overtime to the Ravens, who had really nothing to play for. They already had the division wrapped up, and yet they beat Pittsburgh, and I was so mad. But because Pittsburgh lost that game, it put them in position to draft Ben Roethlisberger, and I think we all can agree that turned out okay. So you never know. I mean, you might have to endure a bad year, but it might lead to something greater at the end. And Sherry Richards says about what I said earlier about Kenny Pickett missing wide open receivers. Can't disagree with Chris Hoke on that one. Yeah, I mean, I've heard more than Chris Hoke say that they're the players are there to be made. If you watch live or if you watch the All 22 film, which I never do, but if you watch that, you see guys are open occasionally, and he's just not seeing them. But that goes hand in hand with being a rookie. And now it's going to be interesting to see if he learns from that. If he studies the film, if he sits there, he seems like he's somebody who's really determined to get better. Well, that involves obviously film study and practice. And when you're in that same situation again, well, last time, when I saw the film on this play, this guy was open. I didn't even look that way. Well, maybe he'll look that way now, and that guy will be open, and he'll hit him. I mean, it's the toughest position in sports to master, and to expect anybody to do it in 4 games, it's just unrealistic. And this from Steeler Chick 46, who says, "This team lacks the Steeler attitude, grind it out, have a chip on their shoulder. Sadly, that is not there." Well, I mean, attitude is great, and having the chip and everything. That all is romanticized, I think, especially when a team is good. But when a team's bad, you can have all the chips in the world on your shoulder. It's probably not going to help. But certainly discipline's lacking. When you see the mistakes they continue to make on these RPO plays, I've never seen so many ineligible men downfield penalties against the linemen as I've seen this year. It's almost like it's frustrating to watch, and of course holding and things like that, and illegal formation, and that's just on the offense. So but then again, when you're talking about discipline, does that also have to do with being a talented person? Because a talented player, I should say, because how often do really good players make mistakes, make pre-snap mistakes, You don't really see that very often, right? So maybe being a great player is more than just having talent. Maybe there's, it's about being disciplined. It's about having those kind of intangibles, So I don't know, but yeah, when you're 2-6, the attitude's not going to look good. The chip's not going to look like it's going to be there because the other team has the chip on their shoulder because they're beating the crap out of your team. Just ask the Eagles and the Bills. There's another from Sean. With getting healthy, I see Pittsburgh beating the Saints, Bengals, Falcons, and Panthers at least, maybe beating the Ravens, once beating Cleveland end of year and beating Raiders. Wow, if that all happens, to me, that tells me that Kenny Pickett's playing a lot better, and to me, that would bode well for next year. To me, like I keep saying, the most important thing to come out of 2022 is Kenny Pickett's development. Not that he's going to be all the way there by the end of the year, but if he can be drastically better by the end of the year than he is right now, to me that's paramount. George Teston says, will be interesting to see how Claypool pans out in Chicago. Yeah. Here's somebody who looked like, to me, he was going to be the next DK Metcalf in his rookie year. And really, we haven't seen much of anything from him since then. But then again, maybe it's just a matter of them not having the offense being bad, number one. Number two, him not having a place in the offense because, I've defended Pittsburgh's draft strategy, but maybe it's kind of silly to draft a receiver in the second and third round every year. Maybe that's just plain old silly to do that, and they've been doing that for years, and maybe it's time they stop doing that. Maybe it's time not that they shouldn't do it if they need to do it, but maybe the whole all right draft the best player available thing. No, maybe not. Maybe draft to need as long as it's not a major reach. So I don't know, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see if he becomes a star there, if he becomes their number one guy, because remember he almost went to Green Bay. He was rumored to go to Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers, and they have nothing there at receiver since Devontae Adams left. So if Claypool can find a home and find somebody that can utilize his tools, he might be a star. He really might be a star. I was convinced of that after his rookie year. And again, I don't know how to evaluate any of these guys right now because the offense has just been so bad for 2 years. And that includes Najee Harris, even Pat Freiermuth. And we're all bullish on George Pickens right now, but who knows what happens to him with a few more games in this offense. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I'm gonna be keeping my eye on Chase Claypool over the next year or so. Mark Tobin, welcome, Mark. Kenny is just a rookie, and to be honest, I'm shocked they didn't use Mason after Mitch. Well, yeah. Well, you remember that? You remember the right before the start of the season there, Mark, how crazy everybody went when that quote unquote clerical error occurred when they released the first depth chart and they had Rudolph second and Pickett third. People went nuts, and then they elevated Pickett to number 2. But it kind of made sense at the time, because of I wasn't really thinking of this in the moment, but as people explained it, well, they were similar quarterbacks as far as athleticism, meaning Trubisky and Pickett. So maybe it made sense that Pickett was the number 2, but I didn't expect Tomlin to put Pickett in so soon. To me, my feeling on somebody like Pickett or any rookie quarterback that you bring in, if you're not going to start him right away, if you have no plans on starting him right away, then you have to be very careful when you put him in. Not that he has to be ready, but if you put him in too early, then you have to leave him in there. You can't yank him in and out. I'm sorry, you just can't do that. So that's always been my theory. Either you throw him in there right away, starting in week 1, since he's your future anyway, and you let him take his lumps, or if you're going to hold him out, and let a veteran start for you, then let that veteran play as long as he can, and then you strategically put your rookie in, and then let him take it from there. But Tomlin, I think he panicked a little bit because I think he wanted to beat the Jets in week 4, and he didn't want to fall to 1-3. He even said it. I wanted to provide a spark, whatever. But he has that mentality, like a lot of the fans and the organization itself is. We're going to do whatever we can to win games and to stay in contention and to make the dance at the end of the year. And I think that's Tomlin's mentality. It's as probably it should be. But when you have a quarterback that you draft in the first round, you have to treat that very delicately. And he might have erred a bit by putting Pickett in. And again, it's not because he's making too many mistakes, or he's just not ready, or he looks overwhelmed. It's because now you have to stick with him. And now people are going to be up in arms the rest of the year because the offense might continue to struggle with him in there making mistakes, and you're not doing anything but keeping him in there every week. But that, unfortunately, is the right move now, is to keep sending Pickett out there. It's just that maybe he should have waited a little bit longer. So. And here's one from Javier More, and I like this because Jeff kind of pointed this out the other day in the article. He said, we're all looking at Bears games now. Yeah, as Jeff said in the article the other day, we're all Bears fans because we want the Bears to lose as many games as possible because that gives Pittsburgh. Heck, if they lose enough games, Pittsburgh might have 3 quasi first-round picks if both teams lose enough games this year. So, all right, it's almost an hour into the show, so I think it's time for me to mosey on out. I think it was a fine show. I hope you guys all enjoyed the content I gave you tonight. Please keep checking back to Behind the Curtain, the website this weekend and throughout the week. Keep checking back to the podcasting channels for more content. We're going to keep bringing you content. It might be a bye. They're on a bye this week, but we're going to keep bringing you Steeler news, Steeler content, Steelers opinions, and you will enjoy it. And it might be a bad year, at least right now, but it's also an intriguing year. It's a fun year in a way because it's rare to see them play this way and have these kind of problems, and it's going to be interesting to see how they dig themselves out of it. So, for Anthony Defia, who is me, and everybody else at Behind the Steel Curtain, you have a great weekend. And I got to do the music. Wait a minute. Let me start that over again. Take 2. So I talk to you on Monday. I'm hanging over with Brian and Shannon. You guys have a great weekend. You guys are awesome. And I enjoy all my shows talking to you guys. Take care.